pillow. I want to talk this through as a way of like getting my ideas sorted, but I want to write a piece about the media last year and how much of it was not only body horror, but specifically just anxiety about the body, both in terms of aging, the body generally, deformity as well. And the through line of a lot of these movies is whiteness for sure. And actually, specifically, most of them that I want to talk about are like being portrayed, these ideas being portrayed through white womanhood, which is another kind of interesting facet of it, I think. But essentially, the thesis that I'm working with is about how all of these things currently being portrayed. And when I say media, I'm mostly talking movies. I'm going to talk about one play as well, but mostly movies here. And how our like collective consciousness is clearly so in like a state of turmoil in relation to ourselves and our bodies in their physical form, and also how that's being shown through the increase in use of Botox, increase of facial plastic surgery in general, and how body augmentation is becoming so much more mainstream, both in like in its accessibility to the masses, but also interestingly to me, I guess this is because of the camp I fall into, but specifically with young women, it's becoming a lot more common. And so I'm interested in like why that is. And again, just like how these things reflect each other, because obviously the reason I love pop culture and the reason I love media is because it's always reflecting back to us things that we're thinking about culturally. First movie I want to talk about is The Substance, which I just saw last week, a little late to the game on that. But it's a movie starring Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. Demi Moore is an aging actress, and when she turns 50, she gets fired from her role on this show. It's kind of like a Jane Fonda-esque like workout show. And she's fired by Dennis Quaid, who is named Harvey, interestingly, and it's kind of just like this disgusting guy who I find it's ironic too as well because he's allowed to age, like he's like probably 70. He's like a showrunner and able to kind of like stay within the culture, but the moment she turns 50, it's like, bye, we need to replace you. And he also blames the audience. He's like, it's not me, it's like it's what people want, we got to give them what they want, which of course has like a seed of truth to it. On her way home from getting fired, Demi Moore gets into a car accident, which luckily she comes out unscathed, but a nurse hands her a note and introduces her to the substance. It's an injection that you take, and you basically birth out of your spine a like better, younger, ideal version of yourself. And it kind of hits her obviously at the exact wrong moment, although she probably would have been drawn to it anyway, but she decides to take it. She has to go to this like sketchy back alley, and kind of retrieves it from this very sanitized, almost tech looking place. By tech I mean specifically kind of like an Apple store looking place. Like it's like all white walls and you're not really interacting with anyone. Anyway, takes it in the most disgusting way. Margaret Qualley emerges as her beautiful, youthful other half. And one huge part of the substance is that you keep being reminded that you are one. So the younger self that emerges from you is not separate from you. It is you. And spoiler alert, it doesn't end well, with basically the younger version of her kind of going rogue, and not respecting the balance where it's like 7 days of being the older Demi Moore, 7 days of being the younger self. The younger self doesn't respect this, so bad things start to happen. And it kind of has this like crescendo at the end of just absolute chaos and body horror, and kind of works as almost a fable of what happens. I wouldn't say it's like what happens with vanity so much so, although obviously it's part of it. To me, it's more just like a self-hatred, like what happens when you hate yourself and what happens when you don't respect yourself and love yourself and accept yourself as you are. It's also just an interesting trap, I think, which is another thing I would like to touch on overall, which is that like even the women who subscribe to this beauty standard, which is like over our cultural beauty standard currently, which is like Eurocentric, white, thin, like how Demi Moore looks. And it's funny, Demi Moore is playing a 50-year-old in this. She's like 62 in real life and she looks incredible for her age, but just because you adhere to those standards, and you check those boxes of what's deemed beautiful, you still are, seen by society as being old, and you still don't win. And even the women who look like that, ironically, in our broader culture, like whether that be really successful women in corporate America or in media or celebrities, those are the women that like often get the most work done, put the most work into, maintaining a physique to look a certain way or a face to look a certain way. I think that's another interesting facet of it. Like, there's no winning in this game. Something interesting to me too is that Margaret Qualley in this film apparently uses like prosthetic boobs in it, even when she's her beautiful self. And I think it kind of just speaks to how unattainable these beauty standards are, where it's like even the actress who's playing like the Sue, who is like the aspirational younger version, still like that's not a real body that you're observing. And then we have a different man, which is, I call it like the masculine substance. It's different but similar. And it's played, the main character is played by Sebastian Stan, and he has a facial abnormality. His character kind of lives a lonely life. He lives alone. It's supposed to be a shitty apartment. To me, it doesn't look that shitty. But anyway, he doesn't really associate with people. Doesn't seem like he has family or friends, which is also similar to Demi Moore's character, Elizabeth Sparkle in The Substance. She also doesn't really have any community around her at all. Stan's character's name's Edward. And yeah, people like look at him on the streets. He just feels so ostracized because of this. And he's given this kind of miracle drug in a trial where his face, he's able to, kind of a body horror way, like his face kind of, falls off, the skins, the tumors fall off, and then he emerges with this beautiful, like Sebastian Stan, traditionally handsome face. There's more to the movie. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but then he meets a man after he has this transformation. He kind of kills off his old self, doesn't really tell anyone. People assume that he killed himself, doesn't tell anyone like what happened, makes a new life, now calls himself Guy, is very successful as a real estate agent. And then he later meets someone who has the same facial abnormality that he had, but like loves life, super happy, super fulfilled. People love him. He's confident. Kind of sends Sebastian Stan's character into a tailspin of like, was this all in my head? Like, why did I change this? And it's not so much verbalized as it is just like you see him going insane. And this film, also similar to The Substance, descends into full chaos in the end. Critiques of this, specifically with the New Yorker podcast, to discuss both of these movies, and they have the critique of like, there are real structural things that impact people who have disabilities, who are different than like the quote unquote cultural norms of how you're supposed to look, etc. So I think part of the film feels a little dismissive of that in some ways. Although I know the director is someone who's born with a cleft palate, and I don't know if he still does or he formerly identified as someone who, has a disability. And so I think that lived in space really felt true in the movie, in my opinion. And I feel like you really empathize with Sebastian Stan's character. Yeah, he descends into chaos, and then he observes this guy who has the same, again, facial abnormality that he had, get everything that he wanted. He gets the girl that Sebastian Stan wanted, the job, like he has just like this very fulfilled life. Get too much away at the end again, but he actually ends up wearing like this mask of his old self, kind of almost as a comfort. The book that's often referenced throughout the film is Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, which is a book about a young black girl who grows up in 1940s Ohio, and she really longs for blue eyes because it feels like that will make her be loved and accepted by the racist society in which she lives in. Then when she does, get this quote unquote transformation, it doesn't bring her any of the things that she desires. Obviously directly correlated to what happens in A Different Man and what happens in The Substance, where people get what they want, but it's not what they think. And I think just both of them have the conceit that if you hate yourself, you hate yourself, and no amount of body augmentation or changing your exterior to fit, again, like a cultural norm, is going to alter that self-hatred if you don't deal with that head on or that first. I think A Different Man, I enjoyed it. I think, again, having that viewpoint from a male view, I thought was really interesting because, again, a lot of these things that I'm observing in culture are often from a female view, a white female view. I also thought, because I saw Sunset Boulevard on Broadway starring Nicole Scherzinger, hashtag Hackgate, but anyway, Boulevard also deals, which is based off a movie, but it also deals with an aging actress. And in the show that I saw, there's like a younger version of herself that kind of acts as like a foil for everything that she longs for. Like she longs for the beauty of her past self and the influence of her past self that she can't get back. And there's also Baby Girl, which is not at all like the same premise, but it does deal with a woman who is aging, and kind of her relationship to herself, and the world around her, and how she kind of seeks validation from a younger guy, to bring both like excitement and newness and freshness into her life, and also how much she doesn't see herself as beautiful. Again, even though Nicole Kidman and the character in this movie both like do the check marks of like the feminine ideal of being like white, thin, fit, but she still does not have high self worth or self love for herself. Not seen this movie yet, but then there is The Last Showgirl, which is starring Pamela Anderson, and it's where a Vegas showgirl learns that the show is closing due to declining ticket sales, and she also has to confront aging in an industry that prefers youth. Now, with all the context of all this media, I think the cultural relevance to me is a few different stats. So, first, the fact that after COVID, there was a 40% increase in facial plastic surgery. The fact that Botox and other neuromodulators, the use of them increased by 73% overall from 2019 to 2022. Not a long time. Things that used to just be things that celebrities would get or wealthy, powerful people in general, again, are now targeting the masses, and are becoming things that everyday normal people use. And also, again, a lot of things that younger women are using. Like I am in my late 20s and I have a lot of friends who are getting these things done. Don't think that people that are 10 years older than me or a little bit older in a generation were experiencing that when they were in their 20s. Thinking so much lately about the 1990 book The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf, where the thesis is basically that as women get more social and economic power, the beauty standards just increase and escalate. And it's crazy to read this book from 1990, now, 35 years ago. And it's only gotten so much worse. Like, again, women have made great economic and social gains in some ways since then. Of course, obviously, we have also had many losses in recent years. It's just crazy what the current beauty standard is now and what the expectation is for so many women. So, huge disclaimer to this, but I obviously have a very American, westernized view of this, so I can't speak to what beauty standards are for women all over the globe. Obviously, to even obtain various things that are body augmentations, you need some class privilege. Another interesting facet of it, though, is that you can never start too young. Like, we see these young girls going to Sephora. I, even as a kid, watched so many YouTube videos and was like aware of skincare routines and makeup regimens from a very young age. Like, young girls asking for Drunk Elephant and posting TikToks of like their multi-step skincare routines when they haven't even reached their teens. Very strange to me that children are even hyper aware of aging or hyper aware of how they look. I also think another part of that is social media. When my generation grew up in social media, like I was like editing on Picnic and posting Instagrams at a young age. So I think children of like my generation and younger are hyper aware of how they look and how they present to other people. And I think it's so harmful. It is harmful to the developing brain to see like how you see yourself, which is already often a distorted view at that age. And to see that like translate to likes or to followings, I think is absurd. What I think is interesting of this too is that a lot of times, like I mentioned this partially before, but women that are even, or girls who are even closer to the beauty standard, so again, mostly like white, thin women, are often actually, and my observation, people that are getting the most work done. About this in relation to the Kardashians, who have like completely changed beauty standards. They alter their body also based off trends, which is another big part of this. Like trends can come and go, and people, specifically people with a lot of economic power, can kind of pick and choose different features that they like, often appropriating different features from minority groups, which is like a whole other topic and very disturbing as well. But this also in terms of young Kardashians like Kylie Jenner, who on the show is a very, very young girl. So we can assume was aware of her looks from a super young age, which we know actually as a fact because she talks about it, being insecure about having thin lips, and starting getting lip filler from a very young age, then making that into her beauty brand, Kylie Cosmetics, and becoming a billionaire at a very young age. So capitalizing off of her insecurity, and capitalizing off of using body augmentation to change how she looks, like sell that to the masses. Recently, I think this was last year, there were pictures that came out where her face just looked very off, and I think it was like a filler migration, and people were just completely shitting on her. And that's so interesting that, again, even these women that are like as close to the beauty standard as you can get have all the opportunities to change how they look, and alter it based off of what the public wants or what the culture wants. They're not even immune from this. They still get the critique and criticism that they don't look good enough. And after that, for a while, she was like using lace to cover her face, wearing masks to cover her face. And this is a girl who's like 26, 27. I just think that's so tragic. And it's twofold, right? Because on one hand, it's culture. Like, we kind of, as a culture, made that, like, we critiqued her as a young girl, she was insecure, she changed these things, and now it's maybe showing on her face, like the results of that. But at the same time, her family has like caused body dysmorphia for the masses, one could say, and also just created incredibly difficult beauty standards. The appetite suppressant lollipops forever ago to, I think, Lemmy currently has a gummy that they say works as like a GLP-1. They just like continue to shift and form to what the culture wants, but it's always in service of like of serving a beauty standard. Of Kim Kardashian in relation to Elizabeth Sparkle, because Kim Kardashian is in her early 40s, and is not that far off from Elizabeth Sparkle's age of 50, although she has barely aged, doesn't look, she looks different just because of things she's done to her body, but she doesn't look that different from when she was in her 20s, like has not really appeared to age at all. And I remember in one interview, she even said that she would literally eat poop if it meant that she could not age, which is just such a disturbing quote. But again, I mean, you got to kind of respect the honesty. At least she's saying it out loud. But I think that's like a perfect encapsulation of where women are with their bodies and with aging. The Kylie thing, I actually just saw someone post on TikTok a video of Tana Mojo laughing, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like inspiration for me to never get Botox because her face doesn't move at all. But again, I'm sure in another breath, people are like, wow, Tana looks amazing. Her skin looks amazing. So I think it just shows, again, you can never really win. And I think us as a culture, we don't like being reminded of how much work it takes for these celebrities to look at the way that they look. Like, it should be in our minds effortless. And so if we have any like reminder of it, whether it be Kylie's face looking a little strange or Tana's face not moving, we just are like so turned off by that. And I think also I think the culture will turn back around, as it always does, or ebb and flow, where we'll want more quote unquote normal faces, we'll want more wrinkles. Because I've been seeing people posting like rom-coms from the early 2000s, and they're like, wow, people's faces actually moved, like they were expressive, etc. But then again, like Anne Hathaway or Lindsay Lohan, or people who have had these like, I don't know if Anne Hathaway had like a facial transformation. Lindsay Lohan certainly did. Christina Aguilera also. We like applaud those women. They're, wow, they look amazing. Like, what's their secret? Of course, their secret is like having a ton of money and access to these various things that can change the way they look. But I just think it's like we kind of can't decide what we want as a culture, and it's like this like chicken or the egg situation of like, did we cause this? Certainly, but then these people are feeding these standards back to us that are making us hate ourselves, and of course, all of it is like leads back to consumption. And wanting people to buy this product or go get Botox and spend this money on these things. Similar to, one thing that's interesting too that's similar to the substance is that Botox and filler, and a lot of these things, they're not one-off things. Like, when you get Botox, you have to go back every few months, drop hundreds of dollars, if not thousands, to maintain this that look. And so I think that's another thing where it's like, there are some things, I guess, like a breast augmentation that is kind of one and done. Maybe you have to get it redone like every couple decades or something, but a lot of these procedures are not. Interesting facet of Ozempic usage, which is also super mainstream, and it's kind of double-edged because on one hand, it is like a life-saving medication. It helps many people that truly need it, but then at the same time, it is also used by people who maybe don't necessarily need it and just use it to try to maintain or get to a certain body type. There's also like the Turkey hair transplant revolution, which I think is also honestly amazing, where men or women who have hair loss can go like get a hair transplant. And I think there's like another facet of this is how amazing these things can be, and like for trans people, how incredible it is to have gender affirming surgery, and for men getting hair transplants, like how incredible that can be to your mental health, to have these things that make you feel beautiful. So I don't know, I always kind of struggle with like where I land on this. I think in some instances these things can be incredible, and in some cases I think it's like, where does it end? And I think also disturbs me when it gets like younger and younger, and you're seeing like children do this, or like women in their early 20s getting preventative Botox. So it's like you can't even really enjoy your youth because you're so obsessed with maintaining it. Also the facet of like just a disconnection from our bodies in general, and seeing our bodies, specifically in like the social media age, seeing our bodies more as something to be consumed as opposed to embodying our bodies. And the stats about younger generations having less sex. So it's like there's less touch or less intimacy in that way. The increased use of surrogacy among the celebrity class and the wealthy. So, and again, that can be a great thing for some people, and like they need that to have children. And then for other people, I think it's like they don't even want to deal with like the quote unquote messiness of having a pregnancy or having a child in that way. So they're like, okay, let me just, pay someone to do this. Also, an interesting facet of even like famous and aspirational men like Tom Brady, who have these like completely unblemished faces. I don't know what he's doing. I know he spends like millions of dollars on his body. I'm so curious, like if he does injectables. I'm sure he does. Who knows? But I think it's interesting that even like masculinity has kind of changed in terms of like what we expect men to look like, and how they age, and like men are even feeling these beauty standards too. Important thing to mention here as well is like a lot of Republican people in Republican leadership that alter their faces but then want to deny trans people gender affirming care. I just think that's interesting and evil. But basically, all that to say, again, I think it's fascinating when what we're consuming kind of reflects back to us how we're feeling culturally. And I just think this is something that is so anxiety inducing for so many of us. And I think part of it's social media. Part of it, I think the pandemic exacerbated it with us being on Zoom and being hyper aware of our faces. I also just think when you're like consuming things where people have these, like people don't age, people have these unblemished faces, when we look at our faces that are like real, or show signs of aging, it's very anxiety inducing. And we're like, wait, am I supposed to look like that? Like, why don't I look like how I looked before? But I think as these different aspects of media are showing us, like it's truly never enough. And obviously self-love, or even just like being okay with how you look, needs to come from like an internal place, which sounds so cheesy to say, but that is because it's true. And I'm curious, I'm sure there are even more pieces of media that like reflect these things. And there's also like specifically body horror as a concept or as a genre, I think really relates to so much of this. But again, just the anxiety around aging or body in general has been seen so much in what's came out last year and this year. And again, I still go back and forth. I'm like, oh, should I have the stance of like no plastic surgery, no Botox, no body augmentation? I don't think I'm just someone who can't really think in absolutes. I don't work like that. So I think obviously people are going to do what they want to do. And I also don't love the idea of like choice feminism and that like everything a woman does is beautiful and incredible. I think we should be able to have these conversations and critique what's going on. And I also just wonder, again, as someone who's like has friends that are like dabbling in this, and again, not in an extreme way, but just in like doing some injections and things. I'm curious like where that goes as we enter our 30s, our 40s. Like, do you up the ante on those things and like get even more done? Do you kind of just again do like a maintenance thing? I don't know. To me, I feel like it almost seems like a never enough kind of thing. And as shown through the media, it's like once you kind of have a foot in the door of body augmentation, like where do you end? I also think of the Gia Tolentino piece about Instagram face that came out like 5 years ago, and how it also people all look the same, which is really boring and not interesting. And I think like having differences in your face or differences in how you look is exciting, and like one of the most amazing parts of being human. I think seeing people that all have the same generic features is just, there's something kind of not interesting about that. But anyway, thank you for listening. I wonder if I'll post this or if I'll go back to the drawing board and do like a more fleshed out version, but this was just initial thoughts.